let's get into King's Rest here for the first match of our day.
Deplete from Beyond and Paint for Femme squaring off, and a little bit of comp differences right off the bat. So let's dive into game number 1.
Yeah, so King's Rest, we've seen some very interesting strats come out. Even though this is a very linear dungeon and you can't do that many big variations, we've seen most teams do very different things. So we see Deplete from Beyond running that Holy Paladin again, as we've seen already being played in this very specific dungeon.
Yeah, the DPS comps have also varied here from different teams. It doesn't in this match. Both teams have come up with the same comp, but not every team has this answer as well. Some teams have been going like double Hunter for this. Here we see both, though, playing an Unholy Death Knight. That's going to work out well probably on this very first pull of the dungeon, where they can probably pull the entire room and Unholy DK it down. It is going to be interesting to see what the difference between the Holy Paladin and the Mystery Room is going to be for them here.
It is actually very interesting because as we were doing rehearsals the last couple of days, we've been watching this very specific pull from Deplete from Beyond, where Rentari just pulls everything together, then leaps away. And we've seen them wipe on this very pull over and over and over during our rehearsal. So hopefully they can pull it off this time around because it is raging. So at the very end, this pull becomes the most difficult.
Ooh, it's also getting tough for Femme there. Femme also dropping to 30% health as they are kiting for the side of Paint for Femme, but both teams still staying alive here. This is the part where things get so sketchy because the mobs are getting spread out. Some of them are casters. Some of them have that other enrage effect on them as well. Both teams do have a soothe effect, though, in the form of that Hunter pet and soothe, so there's not going to be too much threat from just one big raging mob. It's more just when everything rages at once. Looks like Paint for Femme, though, managed to get that pull done just a little bit faster, about 10 seconds ahead now. They are pulling the Golden Serpent, and they have some animated Guardians coming in to join the fun. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond getting ready to do that same pull.
Yeah, definitely a little bit cleaner here from Paint for Femme on their side. And this is just a couple of seconds that save them here, but if they're going to do all of the pulls slightly cleaner, then at the end it will accumulate quite a bit of time. So hopefully Deplete from Beyond can shape up a bit and do those pulls a little bit cleaner as well from here on out. And they also pulled the Guardians on top of the Golden Serpent here, as we've seen most other teams do as well.
Yeah, so Ring of Peace is something that Femme has access to that Deplete from Beyond does not have access to. And that's something that is going to be useful for them. We've seen them use that there to synchronize the two animated Guardian cast. And that makes it a little bit easier to deal with, a little bit safer, and that's letting them, I think, apply a little bit more damage to the boss here. Although, if you look on the side of Deplete from Beyond, look at that damage done by Light Igloo, their paladin.
So
75k DPS.
Curry actually going down and Rentari going down too. I think they didn't have a battle rest because it was their DK that died, so they were missing the one person who has the battle rest, and they could use an engineering one, but it just didn't take long enough. And then Igloo didn't manage to keep Rentari alive with all of the boss damage plus the guardian damage happening, so they have a full team wipe. And one thing I also wanted to note is that they actually saved their bloodlust for the boss. They didn't use their bloodlust for the trash pull, so they had the bloodlust available for the boss, and they still didn't manage to do this pull properly.
Looks like we've had some kind of reset happening coming in here. So
Hey.
the teams are back out in
Jack.
Morales. Yeah.
Hey, how's it
Hey,
going?
we're back.
So we did have a bit of an issue, as you guys were actually mentioning. There was an issue coming up with the affixes not being correct for both of the teams. So we're making sure that we get that fixed, and then we'll be able to hop back into game as soon as we possibly can. And just to make sure that all the bases are covered. Are you enjoying that little warm up there, Tettles? A little bit of running around that you had to do.
Yeah, I actually liked how Paint for Femme was making sure that they kept those mobs grouped up for their first pull, utilizing that DK's grip just to make sure that everything was staying stacked just a little bit more. That's the reason that they were slightly faster than Deplete from Beyond through that first pull. I wonder if they're going to be able to do that again.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, ideally we never have any of those resets, but it'd be interesting to see once we get everybody in the group together, everybody has a chance to kind of refresh and, shake out some of those nerves there, that they'll both be able to execute on some of those larger pulls. And a lot of times we've seen just early mistakes in Necrotic can just completely sink a team, especially on their very first game of the day.
Yeah, having early mistakes, especially in the lower bracket, is going to put so much pressure on them, right? They need a good mentality to go into those games, to just keep up a high morale, to be able to do those dungeons without any bigger mistakes. So a mistake very early on in the very first game is definitely going to be difficult to overcome for those teams.
That's right. So getting everybody back in together, and what were you making there, Tranos, of the differences between the Holy Paladin and Mistweaver? Because we've seen that a couple times from some of the teams.
Yeah, so I think Holy Paladin can really output a lot of damage when they are free and they don't have to, worry about using their cooldowns defensively. But the Mistweaver Monk brings that Mystic Touch, which is passively increasing pretty much the whole group's damage. And they have that Ring of Peace ability, which is really potent for controlling where the mobs are. And, sometimes you can use it to synchronize ability casts. Sometimes you can just use it to keep mobs away from the Golden Serpent and let your DPS stay in for longer. It's a really, really powerful ability that I think they can make a lot of good use out of in this dungeon.
Expanding on that, I actually really liked their bop. I liked Deplete from Beyond's bop usage in the first room with the Golden Serpent. So Rentari is actually playing Strength of the Warden Major. So whenever he got bopped, he ended up using Strength of the Warden immediately to retaunt back all the mobs, and he canceled off his bop just to get a full Necrotic reset.
Yeah, that's a potent combination, especially against Necrotic. And then, so the Light Igloo, he's playing the Vision Major as well. So he gets these Wings procs that when that Wings procs, he can just do massive healing, even though he hasn't actually pressed his Wings button.
And freakish damage.
But there is a little bit of
I was gonna say.
little bit of randomness there as to when you get those procs. Sometimes you can go without one for a minute and things can get very bad. So they are a little bit at the mercy of that effect here, and we'll have to see how well they play around its procs.
And that's one of the things that I was kind of interested in seeing is which paladins would be using Formless for like maybe Blood of the Enemy, for example, when they want to have the timing and they want to be able to use it for specific moments rather than just going for maximum wings uptime. So I was kind of curious to see some Vision Major, because if I'm not mistaken, we've seen a lot of the Warriors lately start running with like Lucid Major instead of what we saw last season where it's almost always Vision Major for them. Thank you, Tails.
You're right. I mean, you're absolutely
if you were
right.
in here, would
I
you be
agree.
running Vision Major, Tails?
The reason that they're running Lucid Major is because the leech healing is so incredibly strong, plus their anger management, like cooldown reset from the rage that they get is super powerful. So I mean, that's why they're playing it.
True. And let's see how it gets. Let's see how it works out for both of these teams as we are ready to go with the game. Deplete from Beyond and Pain for Femme in game number 1 in King's Rest.
This time for sure, yeah. So the affix is active. Hopefully for both teams now are Tyrannical, Raging, and Necrotic. And again, Raging, both teams do have access to a Soothe in the form of the Hunter Dispel on that. So that affix shouldn't be too much of a problem for them if they don't let everything rage all at once. And especially with high stacks Necrotic, that can be really, really dangerous at the end of a pull. Looks like Pain for Femme has gotten a little bit of a head start on activating that Gong. And that might be actually the Mistweaver there. The Mistweaver a little bit more mobile than the Holy Paladin. Meanwhile, Holy Paladin comp here, they are doing this whole pull. And yeah, we're looking to see that bop, Strength of the Warden, perhaps coming out. There it is. There's the bop on Rentari with the Strength of the Warden active. He's going to cancel that bop and get out of there and make sure he holds threat after Strength of the Warden expires. Running away from all these mobs.
Do you think there's any other reason why they're running the Paladin except that... Oh, Light Eagle actually going down. I think there was a Shadow Bolt volley that went
raging
through.
Shadow Bolt volley, I believe,
Oh no, that's going to be a full wipe. Oh, they're all resetting. Oh my god, this is a disaster for Deplete from Beyond. They all were so low HP, and now it's a full reset. I don't think very many mobs died. As you can see at the trash now, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 mobs that actually went down. So this is a disaster for them. They are out of offensive cooldowns now, especially from Kuri, from their DK, so they can't do the same pull again. They're also out of defensive cooldowns on Rentari's side, so this is going to be a big problem for them. They're going to have to do slower pulls now.
And they don't have Shroud either. Now they're getting feared from these minions of Zul near the start of the dungeon, and that is going to send them into these animated guardians, which they were planning to pull later into the gauntlet room, and they're probably going to have to just fight like 4 reanimated guardians together now, or maybe is Igloo there? What's Igloo up to? Igloo went to go pull the other, so they're going to do 4 animated guardians now. I wonder what their strategy is going to evolve to do here, and I wonder if Paint for Femme, once they learn that this has happened to Deplete from Beyond, if that's going to adjust their strategy. Maybe they'll do some more obelisks along the way, because they know they have a bunch of extra time now, and they just need to play safe as possible to avoid having a similar disaster happen on their side of the battle.
Yeah, I think they really should be playing more obelisks maybe along the way instead of having them at the last boss, because as you mentioned, like the amount of time they lost here on Deplete from Beyond side is pretty immense. So playing it safe and playing some obelisks that you otherwise maybe wouldn't do is probably the way to go for them. And I've talked to
Deplete
them.
from Beyond are actually going into an obelisk here as well. They're doing Urgroth Breaker Heroes in this very first obelisk. So Deplete from Beyond kind of planning to also go onto a slow and steady now strategy, and I guess they are hoping that Paint for Femme will have some kind of disaster going on their side, and they can win with a slow strategy too.
Well, I feel like that's the wrong way to go about it if you're already behind, right? Because let's say you're taking it slower now from Deplete from Beyond. Let's say Pain for Fem actually does make a mistake. If you're still going slow, you might not even be able to catch up even though the other team makes a mistake. So interesting to see what their strategy is going to be from here on out. But maybe it's because they needed the portal because they don't have a shroud, so they can't go on the other side. I'm not really sure. Either way, we see Pain for Fem are getting lower and lower on the Golden Serpent, and from their side, it was really clean so far.
Yeah, Pain for Fem on no deaths, no mistakes, no large mistakes that have been made on that side of the battle so far. Shelly, they're just tearing up the damage meters on that Beastmaster Hunter. Look at that, over 100,000 DPS. A couple minutes here into this boss fight, this Tyrannical Golden Serpent boss fight. That's really impressive. Although that's kind of what happens when you're playing with a outlaw rogue and an unholy death knight that isn't really doing their unholy death knight things. Is you can really take all the damage on the single target moments of the Beastmaster Hunter.
It looks like Deplete from Beyond is doing a triple pull here, so they pull 3 packs instead of all 4 packs. Seems like some of their defensives are up again. We have the shield wall, and we have the dwarf rage already on Rentara's side here, so they should be able to get this pull done as long as they have all interrupts available. It was really just because they missed an interrupt, and that was the reason why they wiped earlier. So very important to interrupt that caster here. Not only is the Deathly Chill very dangerous for the tank, which is a huge, I believe it's nature damage, that does a lot of damage to the tank if it's not interrupted. But on top of that, you also have the Shadow Bolt Volley. And of course, in combination with Raging, both of these casts can be deadly either for the tank or for the whole group.
Yeah, when you're pulling 3 of those Witch Doctors at once, you kind of have to let some of those Deathly Chills through, but no Shadow Bolt Volleys should be going through. That is a disaster. You can maybe let one go through with like a Devotion Aura at the start of the pull or something, but you can't just let them go through in the kiting phase. That was definitely, and that led to 1 death, which I think then led to more stuff not getting interrupted, because of course somebody's dead, they have an interrupt, and that means that now their kicks are going to go through, and it all spirals out of control very quickly, as we saw, especially with Raging active.
Yeah, we see Pain for Fem are already moving on to the Gauntlet here. They pulled the other 2 Guardians that were still left in front of the first boss room, and they pull it here on top of the second Gauntlet trash. Now, here in this area is actually a fixed rotation on Tournament Realm. On live servers, it's RNG, which pack spawns, but on the live servers, it starts with the top left pack, and then it goes counterclockwise.
Yeah, which means that the teams here are aware of which pack is coming when, and they can really plan out their strategy, rather than being at the mercy of some randomness there. I think that is a good change here for the sake of the tournament.
Most definitely.
That Channel Lightning cast there. This is a group composition that does have a couple ways to displace that effect. Looks like they're just going to leave it for the ranged DPS to kill over there. Presumably grips and rings and stuff had already been used for other reasons. They're getting through that second part of the gauntlet. 2 mini-bosses remain in this area, or 2 mini-boss encounters rather, and they're making good progress there. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond, Golden Serpent getting below half health there. They've not had any more deaths since that first wipe, so things are recovering for them. But I believe a lead here of about 3 or 4 minutes has been opened up by Pain for Fem. But Deplete from Beyond have dealt with 1 Awakened mini-boss that Pain for Fem haven't already, so they may be setting up to be on this kind of safer strategy.
Yeah, and both of them still have a Battle Res available, so even Deplete from Beyond, even with their full team wipe that they had, at least didn't commit any of their Battle Reses there, so in case something goes wrong in the future, they have that safety net of getting someone back up. Now we see Pain for Fem is waiting for that last mini-boss trash that is spawning now. This actually is decently dangerous for the tank because this mob does a lot of single target damage with the shoot, but it's a Tyrannical setting, so it's not actually buffed.
Yeah, they have the Enrage spell here, which is really good, because if they didn't have that, those Raging shoots can be really, really deadly.
Yeah.
Might require something like a line of sight, which is an option, but not something that you'll really see in an MDI, because it's just such a slow thing to do, to run away like that. They are getting through here, and let's see if Pain for Fem decides to activate Samrek's Pillar here. Looks like they are just not going to bother, so they are going with, I think, unless they're doing they could either be doing the double pillar thing, or they could be doing multiple obelisks with the last boss later. So they are skipping Samrek Beckoner of Chaos. If I was Pain for Fem, I would have considered adding it in once I heard Deplete from Beyond had some difficulties earlier. But I think they might just be confident enough in their last boss that they're like, we can still do this. We're just going to do our route and put up our time, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think teams have a lot of different kinds of opinions when it comes to paying attention to where the other team is during a tournament, right? Some teams, specifically Method EU, they always said, we don't really care what the other team's doing. We're not going to alter our strategy because this is the strategy we practice, and we don't care if the other team is really, really far behind and we could play it safer. We are going to stick to our strategy. So that's the mentality that Method EU always had. But some other teams, they definitely did adjust their strategy and went with an easier route. Now, I can understand both ideas, right? Because even if you play something less risky, it seems better if you're so far ahead. But in the end, if you don't have that cooldown like you have them when you do the riskier pulls, maybe it's not actually easier to do the safer strat, right? Because then your cooldowns are not aligned anymore like the way you planned them to align. So maybe that's just easier to do the strat that you practice with, really.
Yeah, and do you want to spend your brain power in the middle of the match, thinking about all these implications of changing your route and like, should we change our route? What's it going to do to our cooldown timings? Or do you want to just spend your entire focus on doing the route that you've already learned? I think it makes sense to just kind of decide that you're not going to really pay any attention to what's going on with the other team because it doesn't affect you, and you should just put up the best time possible. I think that there's good arguments to be made on both sides of this, but we see Machimba the Embalmer getting pulled for Paint for Femmes. That is the second boss of this dungeon. Let's see if they try and do the strategy that involves breaking their friend out of the coffin as quick as possible. I think that they are, because if you look, some world markers have gone down in front of the coffins, and the team is pre-spreading out now towards each coffin, trying to break their friend out very quickly. If you can get your friend out of the coffin quick enough, Machimba will stop doing other abilities for the remainder of the boss fight, and that can really allow your whole group to just pump damage in without having to worry about dodging burn corruptions or healing through the Drain Fluids cast.
Yeah, this is interesting because some teams choose to not do this very thing that we just saw Pain for Femme doing, because if you don't have Machimba cast any more abilities, there's so much more damage on the tank, right? This boss already does a lot of damage to the tank even when he's functioning normally. But when he functions normally and he casts all of his ability, then there's some breathing room for the tank where the boss does not melee. For example, during the Drain Fluid cast or when he spawns the fire, then the boss doesn't melee during that, and you have a little bit of a breathing room for the tank to recover from all the incoming damage. Now, in a Tyrannical setting with Necrotic, this can be very dangerous if the boss does nothing but melee the tank. So definitely need to look at Fem a little bit here, at Fem's HP, seeing how he handles this boss's damage. But looks like he's doing fine.
Away. He heroic leap there towards the end of the Necrotic stacks in order to reset them. Yeah, it's a challenge though, because as you were saying, shield block up time, it's not 100%. It can get pretty close, but you're going to have some difficulties here as you start being attacked for, over a minute, keeping up, something defensive at any given time. And this boss does hit hard. Looks like they're going to be able to get through this, though. They have the Mistweaver healing as well, contributing that life cocoon if necessary. It doesn't even look like any of that really has been necessary. And, it's not just about the cooldowns that you can commit to this boss. It's also about coming out of this boss fight with shield wall and everything available, because you're about to do a big pull of trash, and you presumably want access to those cooldowns there.
Yeah, I agree. And then this trash group that we're gonna see right after Machimba is definitely a trash group that is known to wipe groups, even on a non-fortified setting, just because this is so dangerous with the Berserkers, and then you have all of those casters with the Spectral Bolts, with the Witch Doctors, instant Frost Shock cast, just so many dangerous things at the same time happening here that you definitely want some defensive cooldowns available on your tank.
Yeah, I wiped this just pulling these first three without getting these next two packs. But they're going in. Yeah, look at those perfect double reflect on the first two Hex Priest casts, interrupts on the next two to bring them in. The Beastmaster gets gripped in, and they have everything now, getting AoE down. Ricky is going to be dropping Death and Decay, and once that Death and Decay goes down, watch that Death Knight just soar up on the meters, casting those Scourge Strikes with Bursting Swords, going off on everything, and that is going to be enough to take care of most of this pack, alongside with Shelly, just doing huge damage the entire time. And they're going to activate both of these obelisks here. Nagura, what do you make of this this double obelisk strategy that we saw coming out yesterday from Paper Femme also here?
I think this strategy might just be the best strategy in King's Rest because, in the end, those two Awakened mobs are probably easier to play with the last boss than the other two that they skipped, right? The Fear mob and the Tank Bastard definitely more difficult to deal with than Void Weaver and the Blood, because there's just a bunch of interrupts you need to do, and the last boss's room is pretty big, so the pulls are also not as big of a deal there. But because you can pull them both at the same time and kill them simultaneously, you save so much more time than having to kill the other 2 awakened mobs separately. And that's why I really like this strategy coming out from Pain for Femme here.
Yeah, it's kind of two for the price of one in terms of how much time it takes you to, remove enemies from the last boss. So you could do, 3 enemies with the last boss that were slightly easier enemies, but, just doing 2 harder enemies for the same amount of time is probably a better strategy here. And it gives them access to a good skip also. Like, they're not going to have to commit Lightfoot potions, shrouds, run the risk of failure of that skip across the bridge. They just have the perfectly foolproof awakened skip instead. Going somewhere they already wanted to go, so there's definitely a lot of value to doing it this way.
Yeah, they also would only have 1 shroud going there, and then the shroud is not going to be ready again to come back. Now, they could go full Night Elves to do a Night Elf Shadow Meld skip on the way back, but then you don't have the Dwarf racial available to get rid of all of those bleed effects that we see in King's Rest, right? The Severing Axe and the Berserker debuffs, and then on top of that you also have Necrotic. So just the Dwarf racial gives you so much value in this dungeon specifically.
Yeah, and we see actually 3 dwarves on the side of Pain for Femme. Everybody, so Femme, Ricky, and Sebe are playing dwarf. Mewo, though, playing the Night Elf on the monk. Shelly's playing a human here. I'm not quite sure. Is human just a good beast mastery damage race, or is there some stun that he's breaking with every man for himself?
I'm thinking about it. I don't think there's anything for every man for himself, but I'm not completely sure. Maybe there's an ability that I can't think of right now, but it's probably just because of damage.
Yeah, so maybe just the human, passive damage ratio is superior here. That is interesting, though. I would have thought the dwarf would have been pretty good for Hunter, too.
Yeah, I agree.
Getting into
Interesting
now
choice.
Kulo the Butcher. This is a scary, scary part of this boss fight on Tyrannical, but because they have so many dwarves, each one of those dwarves can stone form off the Severing Axe cast that Kulo the Butcher does. That makes it a lot less deadly than it would be if they didn't have access to those 3 dwarves in their group comp.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, you can also turtle the Severing Axe if it's cast on the Hunter, as long as you turtle it before it gets applied to you. I'm not really sure about Feign Death. I'm not sure if that will work as well. Either way, you see the Severing Axe unfortunately going under Mistweaver. Mistweaver does not have anything to get rid of Deplete because he's also playing Night Elf, so he's got the Shadow Meld instead of that Dwarf racial.
Yeah, you can actually Shadow Meld between these 2 boss fights bits, and it does this weird thing where it'll actually drop the debuff off of you if it's still on you because you drop combat, and that makes the debuff leave. It's so weird actually melding and feigning and vanishing in the middle parts of this boss encounter. You can get 2nd potions and then 3rd potions and then 4th potion even. Depending on how long the fight goes. Yeah.
I think that's really cool that those teams figured this out, that you can actually drop the boss combat in between those. Because I remember casting a game of King's Rest last season, and then I saw them get rid of the debuff. Some player got rid of their Severing Axe debuff, and I just couldn't figure out why. I was like, how? He's not a dwarf. He didn't vanish. How did he get rid of this debuff? What happened? And then I realized that the whole Shadow Meld out of boss combat removes it. And I was mind blown that these players just figured this small little thing out, which is a very interesting interaction here in this fight.
Look at this. Deplete from Beyond are catching up here. They are now only 80%, 60%, I guess, of Xanazal the Wise's health, separating them from Pain for Femme. Pain for Femme does have a little bit more trash count. I think that means that Pain for Femme has killed 2 awakened enemies and Deplete from Beyond has killed 1. I think that explains the entire difference in their trash count. So I think Deplete from Beyond is going to be doing Atal'Dazar with 3 awakened enemies, not including Urdroth, the Breaker of Heroes, whereas Pain for Femme is going to be doing Atal'Dazar with 2 awakened enemies. So a little bit of a easier fight probably for Pain for Femme, but Deplete from Beyond could absolutely still take this if they can execute this well.
Yeah, Deplete from Beyond actually did a very good job after this very big mistake they did at the start. And this is something that is very hard to do. As we talked about, this is the first game of their lower bracket match, right? So if they lose this match against Pain for Femme, they're going to be out of the tournament. So having one of those mistakes and then still keeping your head cool and staying in the game and playing at your best, it's very it's very hard to do when when you're so close to just losing the game and having such a big mistake. So good for them for keeping up their morale and actually just getting back into the game and not having any more mistakes after this first big one that we saw.
Yeah, you can even look at the boss splits here at the bottom of our screen. We're tracking this. You can see they managed to do their split between bosses 1 and 2, so going to Machimba and getting him down. They made up nearly a minute there through no mistakes on either side, really, but just, you know, more damage and better execution of those pulls. And now we're seeing them, they're probably on track to have made up another minute here on the boss 3 split. That means they can just make up one more minute. They should be caught up. But they do have a harder King-Dazar fight ahead of them with more total damage that's going to need to get done also.
Yeah, and you also see the Holy Paladin damage here. Now, in the end, even though the Holy Paladin does a little bit more damage than the Mistweaver on single target, it's probably going to be approximately the same thing because the Mistweaver also buffs everyone else's damage by 5%, while the Paladin does not. So the higher numbers are not actually meaning that much because of that missing physical damage amplifier on Deplete from Beyond side, unfortunately. Now, Pain for Fam doing this very big trash pull that we've seen a lot. This is very dangerous because there's so many Berserkers and so many casters, and
Yeah,
you can see Fam
Ricky
having
actually
2
died
ways as
there.
well.
Ricky went down near the start of that pull. I think before he actually, looking at the damage meters, I believe he popped some cooldowns and then died. That is a really unfortunate thing to happen as an Unholy Death Knight. You know, you pop your Dark Transformation,
Oh, so many
Unholy
deaths.
Frenzy, and then you die before your Death and Decay gets to go down. And
Fam
that
actually
is
died
causing this
too.
whole thing to, yeah, exactly. It's all spiraling out of control for them now. Because the pack lived for so long because they didn't get to Unholy DK it at all.
Yeah, this is actually huge because now we don't have this big time difference anymore from the deaths, right? We had 5 deaths versus 0 deaths, 25 seconds difference, but now it's only 5 seconds. We have 4 deaths on Pain for Fem's side, so now only a 5 seconds difference between those two teams. That means Deplete from Beyond has a very high chance at coming back here, especially because they were playing the boss fights faster, as we've seen on the last 2 bosses.
Yeah, look at that. That is what the damage meter was supposed to look like there with the Death Knight right at the top of the meters there. But unfortunately, something happened to Ricky on the side of Pain for Fem at the start of that last pull. They are still ahead, though, Pain for Fem. They are getting onto Shadow Azul here. This is going to be a tough bit here for them. They have to hold on to their lead here. Looks like Pain for Fem has a Bloodlust, though, active right now. Nagura, what do you make of that cooldown having been used 40 seconds ago? What was that on? The very end of the last trash pull?
Yeah, that seems
start of Shadow
very.
Azul?
That seems like a mistake because it's Shadow Azul is not buffed by Fortified, and they have a Raging Dispel, and Necrotic doesn't really matter for that mini boss either. So it shouldn't be a big deal for those teams at all. And there's no way they should be committing Bloodlust for this mini boss when they're about to do the last boss with 2 Awaken mobs. And we've talked about this earlier that they're playing with 2 difficult Awaken mobs. They have the Fear mob and the Tank Buster, which is definitely hard to handle. So I think this must have been a mistake. Someone clicked it on accident, probably.
Yeah, we have all drums at the wrong time before that. That's something we've all done at various times in this game's history. So yeah, we're seeing King-Dazar now pulled with the Fear guy and the Tank Buster at the same time here. They do have that Hunter who is capable of taunting every single Spirit Breaker cast with a pet. That is something that they could do to try and take some pressure off of Fem here. And you'll see actually, yeah, that Spirit Breaker indeed going on to a pet there with that a Core Hound with that shield up. So that is going to mean that they don't even have to revive that pet on that first Tank Buster cast. Samrak, Beckoner of Chaos goes down, so the Fear guy is taken care of. Now they just have Urgroth left, the Spirit Breaker. Once again, every single Spirit Breaker is going to get taunted by that pet. That one is going to take down Shelly's pet, but he is quick to revive him. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond gets on to King-Dazar. They have an extra Awakened enemy to deal with here and a different set of Awakened enemies. They are not that far behind here. They could make this up with massive damage, and they do have their Bloodlust available, which is something that Pain for Fem did not have on pull here.
Yeah, so this is going to be difficult for Deplete from Beyond, but they do have the Bloodlust, so they definitely have a little bit of an edge compared to Pain for a Fam. They also will have more single target damage because of the Bloodlust, so there's still a chance for them to catch up. If you look at the boss percentage difference, Deplete from Beyond is not that far behind at all. Of course, there's still a 10-second difference from the 2 extra deaths on their side, but there's still a possibility for them to catch up. Maybe if the extra Paladin damage can catch up compared to the other team, but we see Pain for Fem already dealt with all of their Awakened mobs, and they're now dealing with only the boss left.
Yeah, but King-Dazar, it looks like Deplete from Beyond is focusing damage onto King Dazar, even with some awakened enemies there. Getting some good damage there. King Dazar down to 80%. Only 10% difference in health now between these two King Dazars.
Oh.
And Igloo should be getting a wings later in this fight for damage, but Rentari drops really low and dies actually to the... Was that the Hunting Leap or just the Blade combo that got him? B-Res is coming out, but now Igloo goes down 2. There are still 2 B-Reses available for Deplete from Beyond, so they're going to spend one there, but that is going to cost them time in terms of how long it takes to kill the boss, and 10 seconds of death penalty. And that is really, really catastrophic for their hopes here.
That is brutal for them because we actually had a death on Paint for Fem's side as well. They had 1 damage healer go down. They also had a battle rest available to get them back up, but they were so much closer in deaths. But now with Deplete from Beyond having so many issues here as well, they're just back to being behind 3 deaths, so 15 extra seconds compared to Paint for Fem. This is gonna be too difficult, I believe, to catch up at this point.
Oh, and Igloo goes down
as
to the
Eagle
leap
goes down.
there.
They do have 1 more rest to get them back up though, but now they're out of battle rest, so they can't have any more mistakes. No, Corey going down too.
Corey down to the Hunting Leap. You know, it's tough there because you're trying to cast the battle res, right? And you're, you know, focus on that, focus on getting in range to cast your battle res, and then, you know, the Hunting Leap mechanic gets you. That's really brutal, and they're going to have to do the rest of this boss fight with just 2 damage dealers alive. Paint for Fem now, it's up to them. It's their match to lose from here. As long as they can stay alive and execute the rest of this boss fight, they should be in pretty good shape here. They should be able to win with maybe a minute to spare at this point, given that death penalty, discrepancy, and the extra damage dealer that they have access to.
Yeah, so... Wow, lots of small mistakes by both of those teams coming in. Well, there was of course 1 very big mistake from Deplete from Beyond at the start, but afterwards both teams played pretty well, had some mistakes here and there. Now, Paint for Fem, thankfully they still actually pulled the last boss off without the Bloodlust, because it was probably a genuine mistake by one of the players. Not sure if it was Shelley who pressed the Bloodlust or if it was drums that got used, but either way, I'm glad they managed to do the Awakened pull anyway without it, because otherwise you could be very sad about that one if you make a mistake like that.
Yeah, the middle part of this dungeon was so good for Deplete from Beyond. You know, they were making up time. They had these really fast boss splits, but you know, the first and last chapters of this story were not good enough for them, and that really cost them in this match. Paint for Fem gonna take the win here.
That's right, and Paint for Fem taking game number 1 after both sides having an absolute comedy of errors throughout this game here, Tedros.
Yeah, I was watching the show, and I actually was the one who pointed out. Shut up, Jack.
Were you?
I was the one who pointed out the bloodlust, like the misuse of bloodlust. They were actually just like sitting down, re-feasting and like re-eating and stuff like that, and then just randomly use drums, and I was like, oh no.
That's how it happened then.
Oh,
That's,
no.
you know, that somebody was clicking their food and they clicked their drums by accident right next to the food. Probably.
Yeah, probably. That's what I'd have to assume, right?
That we've all been there.
I think we've all.
Anybody who hasn't been there is lying.
I've done that, definitely.
Yeah.
They would have felt so bad if they didn't manage to do the Awaken pull. I was so glad that they did it anyway. I was like, oh god, thank god.
Well, at that point, they just have to go all in, right? They just have to
they had to, yeah.
hope for their own survivability on that and just try to be able to pull through. And as a result, they do, which also starts putting us into Atal'Dazar being the next dungeon, because they did end up banning Workshop and Junkyard. So I believe we've already seen Paint for Fem play in on Atal titles.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if they're as clean as they were in their previous Atal. They did like I think it was like a 20-story triple Skyscreamer snap that Fem got incredibly low on in their previous Atal'Dazar. So as long as they were able to stay clean and consistent, their Atal'Dazar routing looked very good. Of course, I think they only played 3 obelisks with the last boss. I think it may have only been 2 obelisks with the final boss. So there's some room for time improvement there. But ultimately, I think Paint for Fem's routing in Atal'Dazar seems pretty strong. So I guess it's ultimately up to what Deplete from Beyond can show up with.
Sure, and speaking of tank survivability, I mean, let's just go over some of those replays as well, because tanks were getting absolutely crushed in this King's Rest.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like we were talking about earlier, it started off really slow with major errors from Deplete from Beyond, like that wipe to that Shadow Bolt volley that was enraged, just instantly killing the whole entire group. That was incredibly sad, very unlucky. Maybe they should have used a pet kick from the Death Knight or something like that. Who's really to say what exactly occurred there? But then it looked like Paint for Film was just kind of chugging along and doing really well. They had, like you guys were saying, like they played the double obelisk too. That was really cool. They did a lot of good things. They had like a minor error at the beginning of the bridge, and then that I would deem the Bloodlust on nothing is almost a catastrophe, but they were able to recover quite nicely. And at the end of the day, they were even still like just more clean in their run than Deplete from Beyond.
At the end of it, I mean, they hit Bloodlust and they just instantly try to run in and try to make some kind of use out of it on Zool.
They Bloodlust, and then the person who was the healer was drinking, he instantly canceled his drink, and they all light-footed towards Shadow of Zool. You're like, oh no.
Time to go! Yeah, but after seeing that, I was just like, and then Nagura was like, oh yeah, I mean, like, Zool's not going to be that big of a deal. Yeah, it's raging, but they have a soothe for it, and we're on Tyrannical as well, so it's like, what's the threat here? And then they just go get to fight a bunch of obelisks and a Tyrannical end boss, and leave Raban up the entire time, which also gets some kills as well. I think Raban had some of like the highest kills throughout that run, Dratnos.
Yeah, Raban really got promoted there a couple times, got a couple of extra honorable kills, climbing the leaderboards.
Climbing the KD ratio.
You can be a bit unlucky, when you get corruption slow at the very same time as it jumping on you. So there's things can happen.
He's going for rank 14.
Look, anytime you die, you gotta just open your mic and you say corruption is low. That takes the responsibility off of you.
It forgives everything.
No, it does not.
Especially,
do not tell the people.
Especially if you're a DPS or a tank.
Yeah.
Actually, especially if you're
Not
a
if you're
tank,
the
you're
healer,
gonna get
though.
pulled together. Well, yeah, I mean, if the healer dies, it's always their fault.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, why didn't you just heal yourself? Oh, I was busy healing you. It's like, why aren't you healing multiple people at the same time, right? Come on, Nagura, you know
One
this.
heal?
I know it. That's why I don't heal anymore.
That's right. I was gonna say. That's why you're full on back to DPS at this time.
Yeah, Jack doesn't heal anyway, and he's a healer, so it's...
You just kick stuff, and you let the hot sort everybody else out. That's all up to them, right? Enveloping Mist and Renewing Mist will heal whoever they want. You have no control over it otherwise. Last bit of prep for the Atal'Dazar before we get into our second game. What do they need to do better on this one, Dranos, for Deplete from Beyond to stay in this series?
So Atal'Dazar from Deplete from Beyond, I don't think we've seen from them quite yet what this dungeon looks like. So we'll have to see if they're going to be able to do a bit of a cleaner run, without the wipes. That would be a big thing to do. They're up against Paint for Femme, who had a 0-death Atal'Dazar in their earlier go of it. So even with Sanguine active, even with quite a bit of difficulty added from that affix in this place, they were able to execute it pretty cleanly before. Paint for Femme, if they're able to do that again, Deplete from Beyond is absolutely going to have to keep up and have no major mistakes as well.
Yeah, you hit on something that's really important there. The Sanguine management, especially with how the first pull ends up shaping up, is incredibly important. We see a lot of teams pulling the Colossus with the first pull, and on Sanguine, it can be incredibly dangerous, especially since it is fortified as well. So we got to see what teams are going to be doing with that first pull.
Yeah, we've seen so many times where it's just that first pull sets the momentum and kind of sets the stage for the rest of the dungeon as well, Nagura, because it's so much pressure on them, especially when they have to deal with Sanguine puddles and avoid that extra healing, where you'll see something that looks like a clean pull, but it just ate up an extra minute or two of time because Sanguine heals.
Yeah, Sanguine is definitely an affix that you can't really see if you don't play it properly, at least not as much. Of course, when a boss heals, you will see it, but if a bunch of mobs heal only one tick from Sanguine pool, it doesn't look like much, and it doesn't look like it lost a lot of time, but it's a big difference, right? If you have proper Sanguine management throughout the dungeon versus a team that doesn't, you're gonna make up so much time. And especially this first pull that we've been talking about can make or break it, so we'll see how those two teams are gonna pull it off.
That's right, here it comes. Game is ready to go as Deplete from Beyond is fighting for their tournament lives against Paint for Femme. Game number 2 in Atal'Dazar.
Both teams here on that double Death Knight composition. Both teams going to pull every single piece of trash from this left-hand thing here, and they are going to use that double Death Knight to absolutely annihilate these enemies. But it is pretty dangerous here. They have to be careful of that Sanguine dropping. Grievous and Fortified are active too, so it is a pretty dangerous time here. Look at how big that Colossus is getting on the side of Paint for Femme. Shelly actually goes down. Probably from threat there. That is a common thing there on that pull. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond are already in their first obelisk. They handled that pull with no mistakes. Perfect execution. Getting into Voidweaver Mouth here. Paint for Femme a little bit slower here, but not by all that much. They maybe lost 20 seconds on that first pull.
That was actually perfect execution here from Deplete from Beyond. Very well done by them. They were so fast on this pull. They definitely didn't have any sort of Sanguine healing going on, and they also did not buff the Colossus too much. Now this Colossus gets buffed by trolls dying around it, so kind of like a bolstering effect. So you definitely want to make sure you focus the Colossus as much as you possibly can without killing too many mobs before the Colossus dies. And on top of that, we also saw both of the healers jumping onto this ledge, because if the healer or the ranged target is not, like if there's no path available to that target, then the Juggernauts will not actually use their charge, and that's why we saw the healers there in the ledge.
Yeah, and that's really important as well, not just for the survivability of not having the charges hitting you, but also just to keep a mob in the pack so that it dies at the same time as everything else. We're seeing Deplete from Beyond now. They have exited the Awakened Realm, and it looks like they're going to be doing another trash pool of some kind here. I think I saw somebody running down the stairs, and yep, they have the trash mobs from the bottom of the stairs that will be joining this pool at the top of the stairs, with Priestess Lunza pulled at the same time as well, and they are once again activating that double Unholy Death Knight. Meanwhile, Pain for Femme doing a slightly smaller version of this same pull. Look at that Fel Barrage coming out from those DHs as well.
Yeah, this build is so dangerous for both of the teams, as Curry actually is going down for Deplete from Beyond. They do have a battle rest, so they get him back up immediately. But as soon as they have someone die, it can just have a chain reaction and everyone goes down, because you're missing interrupts, you're missing control, you're missing damage. So hopefully they can pick up the pulls. No.
Look at that, standing in just an absolute massive amount of blood. That is not what you like to see. And extra enemies now getting pulled because Priest Lunza got pulled to that side of the room. The Juggernaut and the Augur actually pull when she gets too close to them, within like 40 yards. And that is going to be extra enemies now joining the fun here. And they're going to be dropping additional Sanguine all over the place. This is a complete disaster. It looks like they're resetting Priest Lunza here to try and recover. Deplete from Beyond, though, everything has gone wrong on this pull, short of a wipe. They've had a death. They've used their battle res. Misty going so low. Igloo on that charge, but is able to survive. Whew.
Yeah, this is just a big reason why this pull is not only dangerous because of the actual mobs and the boss being there, but also Sanguine. And with the boss healing to full HP in that Sanguine, you literally just like, you pulled the boss for absolutely no reason, right? You just had the extra risk and the extra damage from the boss on top, but in the end it did absolutely nothing, because all the damage you dealt to the boss just got healed back up by the Sanguine. So I believe because of Curry going down, they just panicked and they lost their control of the fight, and that's why everything just spiraled out of control. And now they're trying to get back, but the amount of time they lost is immense compared to Pain for Femme already moving on, doing their snapping pull here with the Sky Screamers and the Raptors.
Yeah, and look at that excellent execution of the snap. The snap-on, snap-off strategy here is a great way to deal with Sanguine. You know, you snap the mobs on, you kill the swords, and then you snap everything else off so it doesn't heal from the Sanguine. And there's a little bit of Sanguine healing going on there, but pretty quick use of the Ring of Peace to displace those mobs and get them out of that effect. Shelly is going to die, though, so not perfect execution from Pain for Femme on that either. Deplete from Beyond, meanwhile, they are pulling Priestess Lunza all by itself. That is a real heartbreaker there to have to fight this boss with nothing else going on. Very slow from them.
And some of these snapping pulls, as we've seen from Pain for Femme here, now it looks easier than it actually is, especially again with the Sanguine, because the swords have so much less HP than the Sky Screamers have. So if you pump all of the AoE into that pull and then you don't immediately pull the Sky Screamers out of the Sanguine pulls, all of the damage you did to them is going to be useless, because they heal themselves up to 100% HP immediately. So it's crucial to pull them out of the Sanguine pulls as soon as the swords go down, because there's going to be so many pulls overlapping each other, and Sanguine actually stacks on top of each other. So if one of them gets just one tick of all of those pulls, they're just going to be immediately back to full HP.
Pain for Femme dropping down now to Razan. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond able to finish off Priest Lunza. It's going to be Razan, though, that Pain for Femme is up against. Anything to note about this boss fight here, especially with something like Grievous active? Or is it still not too much of a threat, given that it is Fortified instead of Tyrannical?
Yeah, it really shouldn't be a problem for them to do Razan here. Now, one thing to note as well is that every single player here is playing Shadow Meld, so Night Elf, and Shadow Meld can also be used to get rid of the Fixate here from Razan. Now, if you get rid of the Fixate with Shadow Meld, then there's going to be a little bit more damage on the tank that you need to deal with, and there's also going to be one extra bleed that actually gets applied. But it shouldn't be a problem, as you mentioned. It is not a Tyrannical setting, so they should be fine. Grievous can be sometimes a little bit of a problem for Prot Warriors, because they do have very good mitigation. They just can't heal themselves up to over 90% to get rid of that Grievous on them, though.
Oh, look at all these raptors being activated by Deplete from Beyond. They've just run around and activated all of these raptors, but Missy has died to them. Igloo
They've
down
no rest.
to the raptors with no rest. They're going to have to reset Razan here. That is a disaster. They wanted to pull all those raptors so that they could then use Unholy Death Knight, quadratic scaling to do more boss damage. But unfortunately, they forgot the part where you had to survive that, the pulling of the raptors, which is a crucial part of that strategy there. They are going to have to audible once again here to a slower version of the same boss pull, and they are now way behind in terms of time up against Paint for Femme. Paint for Femme about finished here with Razan and way ahead just on the dungeon in general. I guess their trash count is looking about the same, so maybe not ahead by that much actually in terms of percentage.
Yeah, just so unfortunate for Deplete from Beyond here. This very first pull that they did looked so promising. They had this perfect execution going in, finishing this pull so quickly, and then the mistake on Priest Saloons having to reset the boss and then having to reset Razan as well. 2 boss resets is just crucial on their side. While Paint for Femme just now finished off Razan, they're going to be moving on, dealing with some of the Sky Screamers here. Interesting to note that they didn't actually pull it on top of the boss. Chose to just finish off the Sky Screamer here after the boss fight.
Yeah, they pulled one onto the boss and then they just left the other one up here. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning was behind that. It does feel like this is a little bit inefficient here to fight the Sky Screamer by itself. But yeah, Deplete from Beyond, things have gone bad for them, but I think there's a lot of potential in their strategy here. I think they've showed us that had things gone just slightly differently, they might have an Atal'Dazar they do in like 4 pulls. They found ways to add a bunch of extra enemies to trash or to bosses and pull things that aren't normally pulled together, and it nearly came together for them. So I think that there's definitely good glimmers of hope here for them if that route can work out. But unfortunately, there have been multiple now ways where it has gone very wrong.
I agree, but this is a very interesting pull here for Pain for Femme, as Femme drops so low. This is the exact same pull as we've seen them do the last time, where Femme also dropped so low. Yeah, this is a very difficult one.
Every time,
yeah, I mean, if it works, right? It might just look close. Maybe they're in full control,
Warriors have 490,000 hit points that don't matter. It's only that last one hit point that actually matters. And Femme has figured out how to not have that one go away, and that is really all that matters with this pull. So they have got it reliably down. That looks so scary though, seeing his health bar drop below 20% every time on that pull. They're moving on to another tough Fortified pull here. These Witch Doctors with those Venom Blasts actually do quite a bit of damage. They have to be careful as well against the Shield Bearers, so they're doing a good job here of mitigating the defensive and offensive powerhouses that are in this pull. Gonna add in those Stalkers as well, the stealth mobs. Ooh, but unfortunately a Hex goes off for them.
You see the thing from Beyond here spawning as well. Let's see what they do with that one. Usually as a damage dealer, you just tank it if you're full HP. And I assume that's what they're going to do in the MDI as well. I've seen a lot of them just ignore it and just even run into it at some points. So don't think they care too much about it. They're just going to yell for a heal or 2 heals. And they have to deal with it then. As they pull those last 2 mobs here, the stealth patrol, before they move on. At this point, they must know that they're this far ahead, right? I believe Pain for Femme must know that they had the double reset on Deplete from Beyond side. So maybe they're just going to take a little bit of extra time that they usually wouldn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you were mentioning there actually about the corruption effects. I think that with Grievous active in particular, teams do have to be very careful because it represents more than just the initial hit of the thing from Beyond if it puts you into Grievous, right? Because then you're going to take a bunch of extra damage from that. Same with Eye of Corruption as well. So I think that teams should maybe be considering playing a little bit less corruption when Grievous is one of the active effects. But specs like Death Knight and Demon Hunter actually have quite a lot of self-healing tools. They can get a lot of extra damage from corruption, and then they can just heal back through it when the drawbacks come, and Grievous not too much of a problem there for them. So I think that might be another great benefit to this composition for them. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond, they are doing another bigger pull than Paint for Femme was able to do.
But
they are also having deaths, yes, in the same pull. So they added some Sky Screamers here to this troll pull in this area, and they are once again paying the price for it. To some extent, this is though the effect of kind of the cascading disaster, not the corruption effect called cascading disaster, but the just when one thing starts to go wrong and your cooldowns get desynced and you start doing things in a slightly different order than you're used to, that makes you more likely to wipe on future difficult pulls. I actually like them continuing to try these though, especially when you're behind. It's important that you keep taking risks because you gotta make sure that you're still in range to win if the other team also makes a mistake.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's really like you mentioned before, if they would have pulled this all of this off without any mistakes, that would have been an insane Atal'Dazar. Those pulls that they're doing, those snapping pulls, it's crazy. They could have done the whole dungeon in maybe a handful of pulls. So very interesting to see their strategy on their side. Now, of course, looking at all the mistakes they made, they only had 3 deaths, but those 3 deaths were crucial. And on top of that, you also had so much Sanguine healing and boss resetting going on that it's maybe not displayed in the deaths as much, but it's still a lot of time that they lost. While on the other hand, Pain for Femme also has 3 deaths, but they didn't lose nearly as much time as Deplete from Beyond did.
Yeah, because they didn't have a boss full heal with Sanguine. They didn't have these deaths that caused their pulls to then be not viable anymore because their pulls were not as aggressive, right? They were pulling. They were doing MDI-sized pulls, but they weren't doing double MDI-sized pulls like Deplete from Beyond was attempting. And I actually love to see that coming out from Deplete from Beyond, and I can't wait to see them, refine this strategy, practice it more, and show it to us again, and maybe have it work one time and show us like a 10-minute Atal'Dazar or something.
Well, joke's on you, it's going to be bolstering next week.
Oh, no. Bolstering on live next week as well. That's
oh no.
That's my cue to not be doing live keys.
Anyway, Pain for Femme is done with the boss now as they're moving on. They only have 6% trash left to do at this point. We actually see one of them, I believe it was Ricky, who pulled the middle pack away from the pillar. Now this is a strategy we see a lot on live servers as well. If there's a trash pack that you don't want to deal with next to a pillar, you can just have somebody tag the trash, pull it away, and then everyone else make sure that they go close and click on the pillar to get inside. And then the other person who pulled away the trash, they can reset combat somehow with either Shadow Melt, Feign Death, Vanish, one of those abilities, and then they can come back into the pillar as well. And I'm not really sure if they would have pulled this Awakened mob if everything was normal, or if they only do this because it's the safer strat.
Yeah, exactly. This could be a decision to, hey, the only way we lose this match is by Yasma going wrong, so let's make Yasma a little bit easier because we're still so far ahead here. It could be either one of those things, or they could have just decided that generally it's a good strategy to just not bother fighting Urgroth with the last boss here. Urgroth with that Dark Fury that denies quite a bit of the zone around him, and that might actually slow down Yasma to the point where they decide it's not worth pulling him in with her.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they do have the Demon Hunter who could taunt some of those tank buster abilities, but in the end, it's still very risky to play anything with Yasma, to be honest, because Yasma is a difficult boss fight, even without Tyrannical, just because you need to interrupt her, you have the spiders everywhere, you have the soul rend where you need to go out, you need to see the soul rend mobs so they don't reach the boss, and so on and so on. So having a bunch of other mobs that you need to deal with on top can be very difficult and dangerous, especially with this huge area of denial that you constantly get from the pools and also from the tank buster's Dark Fury.
Yeah, and you don't have any Beast Mastery Hunters in either of these comps, so that makes Urgroth a little bit harder as well, right? Because you don't have the pets for pet taunts. And that is something that is usually used when you're fighting with the last boss to make it quite a bit easier. Looks like Pain for Femme, though, they are going to take care of Samrak back in our Chaos now. They just got the Blood of the Corruptor, and then they will be home free on Yasma Tyrannical here, though. Although, how home free can one ever really be against Yasma Tyrannical? Is a good question. Yeah,
Yasma is just... And also, Yasma is just this boss fight that just takes forever. I always feel like on a Tyrannical setting, even if it's not Tyrannical, on just a high key on live servers, I just feel like this boss fight never ends. And especially as a caster, when you constantly need to move around, it's not very fun.
Yeah, that's that can be a challenge. You find your spot to cast for 3 seconds, and then a spider starts rolling up on you, and then you have to... you have to go to the other side. It is, however, Fortified, I think, not Tyrannical, so I misspoke there earlier. So it shouldn't be actually taking too long for Yasma to go down. Meanwhile, Deplete from Beyond, moving into the Yasma area as well. They are also doing the Urgroth mob separately, so they will also have a 2 obelisk version of Yasma. So their only hope here is going to rely on Pain for Femme wiping in the final 40% of Yasma here with no awakened enemies remaining alive.
Yeah, they have 2 battle rests available on their side as well on Pain for Femme, so even if something goes wrong and someone goes down, they should be able to get them back up. So Pain for Femme, they less clean than their first Atal that we saw. Their first Atal was 0 deaths, and I believe their time was 13 minutes 52, so less than 14 minutes was their Atal'Dazar the first time around. They showed it on tournament yesterday, so a little bit slower this time around, but it was enough against Deplete from Beyond, just because Deplete from Beyond just had so many mistakes on their side, as Pain for Femme 2-0s Deplete from Beyond here.
That's right, and Deplete from Beyond just wasn't
Mr.
able
Jack?
to.
Jack, you're muted.
And